At a luxury hotel banquet, a young housekeeper stumbled and spilled a full tray of wine across the VIP table. The billionaire's wife exploded in rage, slapping her across the face and calling her trash, while the entire room stared. But before they could hurt her again, a German shepherd sprinted in to protect her, only to be kicked, stepped on, and shoved aside as the crowd panicked around them. Then a Navy SEAL stepped forward, calm, silent, and ready to stop the cruelty no one else dared to challenge. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The ballroom of the Grand Haven Hotel shimmered like a jewel box, chandeliers dripping light onto polished marble, laughter rippling through champagne bubbles, and the low hum of a string quartet trying to drown out the emptiness of the rich. It was the kind of night meant to dazzle, to remind people of who mattered and who didn't. Somewhere near the edge of it all moved Mia. She was young, quiet, and had learned long ago that silence was her only shield. The other staff called her the Ghost, not because she frightened anyone, but because she had perfected the art of being unseen. Her hands, chapped from years of detergent and cold water, carried a silver tray of glasses that felt heavier than her small frame should bear. The scent of truffle oil and champagne filled her head as she moved carefully between tables where laughter clattered like coins on stone. To everyone else, she was just a part of the service, invisible, replaceable, and irrelevant. But to Mia, every movement was survival. Each night she worked here paid for the little wooden house her father built before the heart attack took him, the one patch of earth she still called hers. "Careful there!" the head waiter hissed as he brushed past. "Don't spill a drop. These people measure respect by the shine of their shoes." Mia nodded without looking up. She knew the rules. She had learned them the hard way after losing every job that required her to smile too long or speak too honestly. The world was not built for girls like her, girls with dark skin and the wrong accent in the wrong town. So she moved like water, slipping between glances, never leaving ripples. At the center of the ballroom, a long table gleamed with crystal and gold. That was where Harrison Vanderbilt sat, a man whose wealth came from breaking smaller men's dreams into bricks for his own empire. Beside him, his wife Eleanor sparkled in diamonds so heavy her neck seemed to bow beneath them. Her laughter carried across the room high and sharp, the kind of sound that made waiters flinch before she even spoke. Mia approached the table with the tray balanced perfectly. She could feel Eleanor's eyes on her, that familiar gaze that peeled dignity away like paint. Harrison was speaking loudly about his next project, something about revitalizing a district, a word that sounded clean but meant destroying homes. "The city needs progress," he declared, lifting his glass, "and progress always demands sacrifice." Mia's hand trembled. That district, Hope's End, was where her small home stood, the one thing she had left of her father. She told herself to focus on the tray, on the way the glass caught the light. Just breathe, she thought. Just finish this shift. But when she took the last step toward the table, her shoe caught on the edge of a rug that someone hadn't straightened. The tray tilted. The glasses fell like a slow-motion storm, one striking the marble, another bursting into a red splash across Eleanor's white silk gown. The ballroom froze. Music stuttered to silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Eleanor stood. Her hand rose so swiftly that Mia didn't even have time to brace. The slap cracked like a gunshot. "You stupid girl!" Eleanor's voice sliced through the room. "Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" Mia staggered back, her cheek burning, her throat tightening with humiliation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It was an accident." Her apology felt small, crushed beneath laughter from some corner of the room. Eleanor leaned closer, her breath sour with wine. "Of course it was. Everything you people do is an accident. Being here, touching things that don't belong to you, thinking you matter." Mia wanted to vanish. She wanted to run back to the safety of her small house and the quiet warmth of Scout, the puppy she had rescued from a roadside crate weeks ago. But before she could move, a sound broke the tension, the sharp, frightened bark of a dog. From the service hallway, Scout bolted into the ballroom. The guests gasped as the small German shepherd pup skidded across the marble, his nails clicking wildly. He rushed to Mia's side, placing himself between her and Eleanor, his fur standing, his growl trembling more from fear than anger. Harrison Vanderbilt's expression darkened. "Whose mutt is this?" he barked, rising. "Get it out of here." Mia stepped forward, heart pounding. "Please, sir, he's mine. He won't hurt anyone." But Harrison's disgust was already boiling into cruelty. "Filthy animal," he muttered, and before anyone could stop him, he drew back his leg and kicked. The sound of his shoe meeting Scout's ribs echoed horribly in the silence. The puppy yelped, a sound that froze Mia where she stood. Scout hit the floor and didn't move. That was when Elijah moved. He had been standing near one of the marble pillars, watching everything with the detached stillness of someone used to assessing threats. A Navy SEAL on leave, he was supposed to be here as a favor to his old commander, Colonel James Miller, who now ran a security consultancy and had business with Harrison Vanderbilt. Elijah had promised himself to endure one evening of polite conversation, one evening pretending to belong among men who played at power. But the moment he saw the kick land, something inside him, something that had been buried under discipline and quiet, snapped. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. Before Harrison could take another step, Elijah's hand caught his arm mid-swing. His voice was low, steady, and dangerous. "Don't!" Harrison twisted, red with outrage. "Who the hell are you?" Elijah's grip tightened. With a single, precise motion, he turned Harrison's body, pressing him face first onto the floor. The maneuver was clean, effortless. Not violent, but absolute. "A man who's seen what power does," Elijah said quietly, his breath steady. "And I've seen better men than you fall for less." Eleanor screamed for security. The crowd backed away, whispering, but no one stepped forward to help Harrison, not even his friends. The mask of respect had slipped. Everyone could see what lay underneath. Elijah let go and straightened his posture. "If you ever raise your hand again to a woman or an animal, you'll answer to me." He turned to Mia. "Come on." Mia hesitated, torn between fear and disbelief. Whole body shook as she looked down at Scout. The puppy whimpered weakly, still breathing. She gathered him in her arms as Elijah guided her toward the exit. No one stopped them. The crowd parted like the sea, their silence heavier than judgment. Outside, the coastal wind hit them, cool, briny, alive. Mia clutched Scout to her chest, tears mixing with the salt air. Elijah glanced down at her, his jaw set, the faintest shadow of grief in his eyes. The look of a man who had seen cruelty before and perhaps once delivered it. "You're safe now," he said, though he knew it wasn't true. Safety, for people like her, never lasted long. Behind them, Through the hotel's glass doors, the chandelier still sparkled, untouched. Inside, the powerful kept toasting themselves, pretending the world hadn't just changed for someone outside in the cold. Rain swept across the small coastal road leading toward Mia's home, a weather-beaten wooden house tucked behind a wind-bent pine tree on the edge of Hope's End. Elijah drove in silence, the wipers struggling to clear the windshield as Scout whimpered faintly in Mia's arms. The warmth of the car felt fragile, like a thin barrier between them and the cold, brutal world they had just escaped. Mia held the injured puppy tight, whispering to him as though her voice alone could mend whatever had been broken by Harrison Vanderbilt's violent kick. Elijah kept glancing at her through the mirror. Her shoulders were trembling, though she hadn't cried since they left the hotel. There was something unsettling about her stillness. It wasn't shock. It was resignation. The kind people carried when they had learned early in life that the world did not care enough to be fair. When they arrived, the storm had grown heavier, slamming against the house as though trying to force its way inside. The lawn was muddy, the small porch creaking under the pressure of the wind, but the house stood stubbornly, as if refusing to surrender to time or weather. It was modest, built with care, clearly old, but tended by hands that cherished it. Elijah felt a strange ache in his chest. The contrast between the glittering hotel and this humble sanctuary made the cruelty of tonight feel even sharper. Inside, the house smelled of old books, lavender, and the faint remnants of her father's cologne, still lingering on the worn coat hanging by the door. Mia set Scout gently on a folded blanket near the heater and knelt beside him. "He's still breathing," she murmured with a tremble in her voice, "but something's very wrong." Elijah crouched beside her, examining the puppy. The labored breaths, the way he curled inward, the small flinches of pain. He had seen all of that before in wounded military dogs overseas. Scout was trying to stay awake for her. That loyalty alone was enough to break a man. "He needs help now," Elijah said. "There's a vet nearby. Sam Higgins, old guy, but the best in the county." She looked up at him with fear. "Will he come? It's late, and the storm." Elijah didn't hesitate. "He'll come for me." He stepped outside to call Sam. The wind almost tore the phone from his hand. Within minutes, Sam's old pickup truck rumbled into the yard. The man who climbed out was in his 60s, thin but sturdy, with a permanent weariness that suggested a life spent patching up broken creatures in the middle of harsh nights. He had known Elijah since he was a boy and had stitched more than one military K-9 after service injuries. Without asking questions, Sam entered the house, set his bag down, and knelt by Scout. "Pup's tougher than he looks," he muttered as he examined the dog. "But the kick was bad, real bad. We need to stabilize him before shock sets in." As Sam worked, Elijah noticed how Mia clutched the edge of a chair, her eyes never leaving Scout. Her breaths were shallow, each one tighter than the last. When Sam finally injected a sedative to ease Scout's pain, Mia jerked forward. "Is he going to die?" Sam looked up, his expression calm but honest. "Not if we fight for him." The next half hour unfolded like a battlefield triage. Sam's voice was steady, guiding Elijah, who held the pup still while Mia wiped sweat from Scout's forehead. The storm outside roared so hard it shook the walls, as though nature itself was echoing their fear. But Scout held on, and when Sam finally leaned back with a tired sigh, he said, "He'll make it through tonight. But you need to keep him warm and quiet. No stress." Mia collapsed into the nearest chair, her hands covering her face. Relief broke through her like a silent earthquake. Elijah stepped outside for air, his heartbeat still racing. The rain soaked him instantly, but he barely noticed. His mind kept circling the same truth. Harrison Vanderbilt would not let this go. A man like that didn't forget humiliation. He retaliated. And the easiest target wasn't Elijah. It was Mia. When he returned inside, he found her sitting near Scout, gently stroking his side. "Thank you," she whispered without looking up. "Not just for Scout. For everything." Elijah leaned against the doorway. "You don't have to thank me." She turned her head slightly. "Most people don't step in. Not when the ones hurting you are powerful." He didn't answer. She didn't need the whole story about the times he hadn't been fast enough to save someone, about the guilt that followed him home. Instead, he looked around the small living room at the worn photos on the shelf. Her father appeared in several of them, smiling, holding baby Mia, standing proudly beside the house. "Your dad built this place?" he asked. She nodded. Every plank, every nail. Her fingers brushed Scout's fur absently. People said he should move somewhere safer, somewhere easier, but he said a home shouldn't be abandoned just because the world outside turned cruel. Elijah felt the full weight of that sentence settle onto him. "Harrison's planning a development in this area," he said quietly. "A big one, commercial, aggressive. He's been buying land all over Hope's End." Mia's breath hitched. "And my house. He wants it gone." She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought tonight was the worst thing he could do to me," she whispered. "But this is worse. This is everything I have left." Elijah wanted to tell her not to worry, that he'd protect her. But promises like that were dangerous. He'd learned that in the field. So he said the only thing he could say honestly, "He won't take this from you without going through me first." A violent crash hit the side of the house. Mia jolted upright. Sam Higgins flinched and looked toward the window. Elijah moved instantly, scanning the dark outside. Another impact struck the wall harder this time, rattling the frame. Then a low, distant voice carried through the storm, a man's voice, followed by another. Mia's face drained of color. "Elijah, someone's out there." And then the lights flickered once before cutting out completely, plunging the house into darkness. The storm raged. The house groaned. And in the blackness outside, footsteps approached. The chapter ends here. Wind hammered against the small wooden house, as if trying to break its spirit, and the darkness that had swallowed the lights inside pressed close against every window. The storm roared like a living creature, drowning out everything except the frantic rhythm of Mia's breathing. Scout whimpered softly from the blanket where he lay recovering, his instincts awake even through pain. Elijah stood completely still, letting the silence between each crash tell him more than noise ever could. Years of deployments had trained him to read danger not by sight, but by what shifted in the air. The sudden pause in the wind, the low scrape of a boot on gravel, the wrong kind of quiet before violence. Someone was outside, more than one, and they weren't trying to hide. Sam Higgins glanced around, instinctively checking the windows. The old vet had been through enough late-night emergencies to recognize when trouble wasn't medical. He lowered his voice. "Elijah, this storm keeps normal folks home. Whoever's out there didn't come for shelter." Elijah didn't answer. His attention was fixed on the shadow sliding past the front window. A second shape followed. He counted 3, maybe 4. moving with confidence, not kids, not drunks, men with purpose. Mia pressed a hand to her mouth. "Is it him?" she whispered. It was the question she already knew the answer to. No one else in town had reason to come after her tonight. Elijah could hear the trembling in her voice, the way fear mixed with humiliation from the hotel, with terror for her home and the dog she was still protecting with both hands. But beneath all that, there was something else, too, something harder, raw, born from years of being overlooked and pushed aside, a spark of defiance beginning to pull breath back into her lungs. The storm hissed as a rock slammed into the side of the house. "Hey!" a man shouted from outside. "We know you're in there. Open up!" Another voice followed, deeper, mocking. "Come out now, girl. Your time here's done." Mia flinched, her hands gripping the back of the chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. Scout lifted his head, growling through pain, trembling but ready. Elijah placed a calming hand on the pup. "Easy. You're hurt. Let me handle this." Sam stepped closer to Mia. "Stay behind me." She wanted to obey, but her feet refused to move. The house shook again. The back door rattled, then a heavy stomp against the front porch. Elijah's eyes sharpened. "They're testing entry points." "What do they want?" Mia whispered. Elijah answered quietly. "To scare you. To break something important. To make you leave so Harrison can take this land." Her breath hitched. The last thread of hope she'd held, that maybe Harrison wouldn't escalate, snapped. "He sent them," she said, voice cracking. "He actually sent them." Elijah didn't sugarcoat it. Men like Harrison don't like being embarrassed, and they really don't like being stopped. Another crash sounded from the back door, louder this time. Wood splintered. Mia gasped and instinctively ran to the hallway as if her body acted before her brain. Elijah caught her wrist. "Hey, look at me." She did. Her eyes were wide, not with panic now, but with something deeper, the realization that this night wasn't just about a mistake at a party or a dress stained with wine. This was about her home, her father's home, the last piece of her life that no one had stolen yet. Elijah spoke quietly, intensely. "Fear is real, but so are you, and you're not alone tonight." Something steadied inside her. The storm rattled the walls again, but Mia didn't flinch this time. Instead, she turned toward Scout. "Stay," she whispered. The puppy whined softly, fighting instinct, but obeyed. Elijah moved through the dark house with silent precision, checking angles, listening to the storm. Mia followed close behind, quieter now, her breath steadying. When they reached the small kitchen, Elijah peeked through the cracked blinds. 3 men stood in the yard. One held a metal pipe. Another carried a heavy flashlight, tapping it against his palm. The third had his jacket pulled tight, pacing like he owned the property. None of them looked hesitant. They were waiting for a signal. "They're not here to talk," Elijah murmured. Sam cursed under his breath. "Idiots! Storm like this, someone's going to die out there." Elijah took a slow breath. "They want her scared. They want property damage. They want to send a message." A slam hit the back of the house again. This time, the door frame cracked audibly. Mia's heart jumped. "Elijah, they're going to break in." He turned to her. "Then we'll make sure they regret it." She stared at him. "How? You're just one person." Elijah shook his head. "I'm not." Understanding flickered in her eyes. Her voice wavered but steadied. "Tell me what to do." That was the moment something changed, not in the room but in her. She wasn't the trembling girl holding a tray while rich people laughed. She wasn't the frightened orphan trying to survive quietly on the fringes of a wealthy town. She was someone who had finally reached the limit of how much the world could take from her. Elijah opened a small cabinet and handed her a heavy flashlight. "Lighten their eyes if they get inside." Loud voice, no hesitation. She nodded. Another slam. This time, the back door cracked open enough for cold wind to slice into the hallway. Elijah positioned himself between the entry and Mia. Scout barked sharply from the living room, the sound filled with pain, but also fury. The men outside laughed. "Hear that? Little girl's mutt wants to play." Elijah's jaw tightened. He whispered one instruction to Mia. "When the door opens, stay behind me, and don't run." The final blow came. The back door burst inward, wind and rain exploding into the kitchen. A man stepped inside, then another. Their shadows stretched long in the darkness, storm soaking them until they looked like beasts rising from the night. Mia forced herself not to step back. Elijah's voice cut through the storm in a low, controlled warning. "You have 5 seconds to leave." The first man smirked. "Or what?" Elijah moved, fast, quiet, precise. The fight began before the man even understood that it had. And as the storm raged around them, as Scout barked and Mia held her ground, one truth became painfully clear. This was no longer about a spilled tray of wine. This was war over a home, and the night was far from over. The chapter ends here. Rain hammered the broken doorway as the first intruder stumbled into the cramped kitchen, and for a moment the storm and the violence felt like a single force trying to rip Mia's small home apart. Elijah moved before the man could fully regain his balance, stepping into the attack with a calmness that came not from confidence, but from long-grown discipline. Combat to him was not adrenaline. It was arithmetic. 2 men inside now, at least one still outside. Narrow hallway behind, unstable flooring near the pantry, limited lighting. Protect Mia, protect Scout. End this quickly? The first intruder swung a metal pipe, sloppy but backed by weight. Elijah ducked under it, letting the momentum carry the man forward. His counterstrike was fast, elbow to ribs, hand to collarbone, and the man crumpled with the muted grunt of someone who had expected an easy job and found a nightmare instead. The second man was bolder. A scarred face, a jaw set with the stubbornness of someone who'd survived street fights long before Harrison ever paid him. He came with 2 hands, one reaching, the other holding a heavy flashlight like a club. Elijah blocked the swing with his forearm, the thud vibrating along his bones, and used his shoulder to shove the man back toward the kitchen table. The table legs scraped loudly against the floor. Sam pulled Mia toward the corner, shielding her with one arm while pushing a lantern into her shaking hands. Elijah didn't look back, but he could feel her terror, sharp, focused, but no longer paralyzing. The second man opened his mouth to taunt, but the storm drowned out his voice. He lunged again, aiming low this time, desperate. Elijah sidestepped, grabbed the back of the man's jacket, and drove him into the pantry door with enough force to rattle every jar on the shelves. Something cracked. Maybe wood, maybe pride. The third intruder burst through the doorway from outside just as Scout barked, a broken but furious sound that filled the house like a warning bell. The man flinched at the dog's cry, and in that hesitation, Mia acted. It wasn't planned, it wasn't brave, it was instinct. Years of being ignored, belittled, pushed down, all rising at once. She lifted the lantern, stepped forward from the corner, and shined the beam directly into the man's eyes. "Leave!" she yelled, her voice deeper, stronger than she knew she had. The intruder cursed, raising an arm to shield himself, blinking hard. That was all Elijah needed. He landed a strike that sent the man stumbling back into the storm-soaked yard. The others, disoriented and gasping, scrambled after him. The storm swallowed them as quickly as it had delivered them. For a moment, only the rain spoke. Then Scout whimpered. Mia rushed to the puppy, kneeling and pulling him close. "You're okay," she whispered, though her voice broke on the last syllable. Elijah stood in the doorway, rain soaking his hair and shoulders, his breath steady, but his eyes burning with controlled fury. Sam leaned against the counter, letting out a long, tired breath. "They'll be back," the old vet muttered, stating the truth none of them wanted to say first. Elijah didn't turn around. Not tonight. That was meant to scare her. A message. He finally looked back at Mia. Her face was pale but determined, her arms wrapped protectively around Scout. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't shaking. She was thinking. "If he can send men to my home," she whispered, "then he wants me gone more than I realized." Elijah walked toward her slowly, studying her expression. "He wants the land under you, and he knows fear makes people move." She clutched Scout tighter. "I'm not leaving." Something shifted in Elijah's posture then. Not relief, not pride, but something quieter. A recognition. The same quiet flame he'd seen in soldiers who had lost everything and still chose to stand instead of run. Before he could speak, the dim lamp flickered, then a hard knock slammed against the front door, firm, official. Mia's breath caught. "Not again," she whispered. But Elijah already knew the rhythm. This wasn't the violent pounding of thugs. This was deliberate law enforcement, sheriff's men. They rarely came in storms unless someone had pushed them to. Sam swore under his breath. Elijah stepped toward the living room, his voice low. "Stay with Scout. Don't say anything until I tell you." Another knock. "Mia Carter?" a muffled voice called. "Sheriff's office. We need to speak with you." Cold dread spread through her chest. Already? He already filed charges? Elijah opened the living room door a crack, rain blowing across his face. Two deputies stood on the porch, hats pulled low, jackets soaked through. They looked uncomfortable, like men forced into a job they didn't want. The older one held an envelope. "Miss Carter?" Elijah stepped forward, blocking their view of the inside. "She's not answering any questions." The younger deputy shifted awkwardly. "Commander Thorne, we're not here to arrest anyone. Not yet." The older deputy lifted the envelope higher. "But we were ordered to serve this tonight. Owner eviction notice, effective immediately." Elijah's jaw tightened. Mia's hand covered her mouth. Sam muttered something sharp under his breath. The deputy looked apologetic. "We're real sorry, but the complaint's already filed. She's got 72 hours to vacate the property before the county seizes it for development review." Mia shook her head, tears starting to gather, but not falling. "My father built this house. This is all I have." The deputies didn't meet her eyes. Elijah stepped in fully between Mia and the doorway, his voice steady. "You delivered the notice. Now leave." They hesitated but obeyed. When the door closed, the storm was suddenly too loud. Mia stared at the paper in Elijah's hand. Her voice trembled for the first time since the fight. "He's taking my home." Elijah folded the notice, expression unreadable. "Not if we take the fight to him first." Sam gave a grim nod. She'll need allies and witnesses and proof. Elijah turned to Mia, eyes filled with a new kind of resolve. Tomorrow we start fighting back. But tonight you're not alone. They won the scare tactic. He reached out, gently tilting her chin up. But they didn't break you, and that's what he wanted most. Outside, the storm began to ease, just a little, enough to reveal distant headlights turning into the long road that led from town. Elijah stiffened, staring out the window. The car slowed to a stop at the edge of the property. Its engine idled. It didn't leave. Someone was watching the house, waiting. Chapter 4 ends here. A gray dawn hovered over Mia's battered home, the kind of light that seemed neither alive nor dead, but suspended in hesitation, like the world was holding its breath. The storm had passed, leaving the yard soaked and glittering with thin films of water clinging to the grass. The strange car from the previous night was gone, but the memory of its idling engine lingered like a bruise in the air. Inside the small kitchen, Elijah stood at the sink, splashing cold water onto his face. He had slept less than an hour, if at all. Rest didn't come easily to him even on quiet nights. On nights like the last one, it refused to come at all. Sam sat at the table drinking bitter coffee that tasted like burnt patience while Mia fed Scout small bits of boiled chicken. The puppy's trust in the world had been shaken, but his spirit, though bruised, refused to break. He kept glancing toward the door, ears twitching at every sound, unwilling to forget the violence that had once burst into this room. "We don't have long," Sam said, putting down his mug. Those deputies weren't lying. 72 hours. Mia nodded silently, though her throat tightened every time she thought of the paper now lying on the table between them. It was still folded, but its presence filled the room like a slab of ice. Elijah dried his hands, looking at the notice as if it were an enemy he needed to study and dismantle. "We're not using 72 hours, he said. "We're using today. Tonight we fight on his battlefield." Mia looked up, exhausted but attentive. "What do you mean?" Elijah pulled a small notebook from his pocket, opening it to a blank page. "Harrison didn't send amateurs last night. Those men were organized, professional enough to follow orders, but not professional enough to stay quiet, which means they'll be looking for payment or cover today." He tapped his pen against the notebook. "Men like that leave trails, mistakes, loose ends." Sam grunted. "And you think you can pull a thread loose before they sew the whole town against her?" Elijah looked at him with a steadiness that came from years of making impossible decisions. "I know I can." Mia watched him write a few names, locations, small clues from last night, details she hadn't even noticed he had been observing. Elijah always watched, even when angry, even when exhausted, even when drenched in rain and fighting men twice his size. He watched. "Where do we start?" she whispered. Elijah paused, then pointed to the first name. "Frank Henderson. He's the hinge. Everything swings on him." Sam's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You think the man who guards Harrison's empire is going to help you tear it down?" Elijah didn't smile, but his expression shifted. "I think he's tired of serving a man he doesn't respect." He tucked the notebook away and headed for the door. "Sam, stay here. Don't let Mia or Scout out of your sight." Sam nodded, his jaw tightening in a silent vow. Mia stepped forward. "Be careful." Elijah held her gaze for a moment, not with reassurance, but with acknowledgment. Fear and courage lived in her eyes side by side now, and he saw both clearly. "I always am," he said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. He closed the door behind him. The long day began. Elijah found Gunny Henderson at a gas station on the edge of town, filling up a black company SUV. Henderson looked the same as he had in the bar weeks ago, square shoulders weighed down by more years than he would ever admit, a face carved by duty and regrets, and eyes that measured every person who approached him. "I figured you'd show up," Henderson muttered, without turning. "Your type always does. Soldiers who don't know when to let a fight go." Elijah didn't bother with small talk. "You know what Harrison did last night." Henderson screwed the gas cap back on with a sharp twist. "I know he sent people. Don't ask me how I know." Elijah stepped closer, speaking quietly enough not to carry. "He sent them to destroy her home, not scare her. Destroy it." Henderson's jaw tightened. Behind the gruff exterior lived a man who had seen real destruction, the kind that didn't involve property, but lives. "Why are you telling me this?" Henderson asked. Elijah held his stare. "Because you're the only one who knows how far Harrison intends to go." Henderson looked away, rubbing a hand over his face. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "He wants the land no matter the cost. He's been buying off officials for months. Half the planning commission answers to him, and now he's using the girl to corner the old woman." Elijah's tone sharpened. "Mia's not a bargaining chip." Henderson gave a humorless exhale. "In his world, everyone is." Elijah leaned in. "Not you," he said. And for a moment, Henderson's tired eyes lifted. "You were built for war, not for cleaning up a coward's mess." Something flickered in the older man. Resentment, conscience, guilt. Elijah couldn't be sure. Then Henderson glanced toward the SUV, checking the reflective mirror. "Meet me at Debbie's Diner tonight. 10 p.m. Come alone." Elijah frowned. "Is this a trap?" Henderson smirked thinly. "If it was, I wouldn't warn you. Just be there." He got in the SUV and drove off, leaving Elijah with more questions than answers. Back at the house, the hours crawled. Mia tried to stay busy, sweeping glass, straightening the furniture, feeding Scout, but the weight of the eviction notice shadowed everything. Sam repaired the broken doorframe with quiet concentration, though now and then he paused to glance out the window as if expecting trouble. At sundown, Elijah returned, the air around him different, charged, sharpened. "We have a lead," he told them. "Tonight we act on it." Mia swallowed hard. "What if it's dangerous?" Elijah answered simply, "Then we're already halfway prepared." Sam grabbed his jacket. "You're not going alone, boy." Elijah hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay in the truck unless I call for you." Debbie's Diner glowed like a tired lantern in the dark, neon buzzing faintly. Inside, Henderson sat in a back booth, shoulders hunched, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. He didn't look up as Elijah slid in across from him. "I don't have much time," Henderson said quietly, "and neither do you. Harrison is accelerating everything, filing more complaints, calling in favors." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Why?" Henderson's voice dropped. "Because he knows he's losing control, and men like him get violent when they lose control." He then reached into his coat, not threateningly, but with a heaviness of someone deciding to betray a master he never respected. He pulled out a small black SD card. "This," he said, pushing it across the table, "is everything. Security feeds, audio logs, meetings he thought were private, even what he said about the girl." Elijah slowly picked up the card. "Why give it to me?" Henderson looked at him then, really looked, and Elijah saw the truth. A man who had once fought for something noble, but had wasted too many years in the shadows of men like Harrison. "Because I remember what the Corps taught me," Henderson murmured. "Honor isn't something you hang on the wall, it's something you bleed for." Before Elijah could reply, Henderson slid out of the booth. "Be careful," he said. "He'll come for you now." Elijah rose to follow him, but Sam grabbed his arm just as the door opened, because outside, parked across the street, was the same car from last night. And this time, the engine wasn't idling. It was revving, waiting, watching. The night had only begun. The wind cut across the empty streets of Kingsport like a blade, carrying with it the faint hum of streetlights and the murmuring of a town that sensed something was about to break. Elijah stood beneath the flickering lamp outside the diner, the SD card secure in his grip, its tiny weight feeling heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Across the road, the same dark sedan idled, its headlights dimmed, its silhouette motionless, watching, waiting. Sam stepped up beside him, his old boots scraping the pavement. "They're not here to scare us any more," he muttered. "They're here to see what we do next." Elijah didn't look away from the car. "Let them watch," he said quietly. "We're going where they can't stop us." But inside, he felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the shift from threat to inevitability. Harrison Vanderbilt wasn't playing games anymore. He was cornered, and cornered men were unpredictable. Elijah and Sam climbed into the truck, the engine rumbling to life. As they pulled onto the main road, the sedan didn't follow. It simply faded into the darkness, as if melting into the night. That was somehow worse. Back at Mia's house, the lamps were dimmed, and the air carried the nervous stillness of a battlefield before dawn. Mia sat at the kitchen table, Scout curled against her feet, the eviction notice still lying untouched where Elijah had left it. Hours had passed, but anxiety held her in a quiet chokehold. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. When the truck engine growled into the driveway, Scout lifted his head, ears rising, and Mia felt something new, a pulse of hope cutting through the fear. The door swung open. Elijah entered first, Sam behind him, both men carrying a gravity that shifted the air inside the house. Mia stood immediately. "Did he?" Elijah placed the SD card on the table. "We have everything we need," he said. "Proof, witness, audio, video, enough to bring Harrison and his entire web down." Mia exhaled shakily, covering her mouth. The relief was overwhelming but fragile, trembling as though she feared the truth might vanish if she blinked. Elijah stepped closer. "But we have to move fast. Once we play this card, everything escalates." Sam poured himself a glass of water and downed it in one swallow. "The town council meeting is tomorrow evening. Public recorded. Sheriff will be there. Press sometimes shows up when Vanderbilt funds the refreshments." Elijah nodded. "It's the only place we can't be silenced." Mia hesitated, then asked, "You mean we're going to expose him in front of the whole town?" Elijah's gaze was steady. "We're going to make sure Kingsport sees the truth with their own eyes, and he won't be able to bury it." Scout leaned into Mia's leg as if sensing the moment's weight. Mia reached down, her hand trembling as she stroked his fur. For the first time in days, she felt something returning, a sense that maybe her home wasn't already lost. Maybe she had a place in this fight. Midnight crept over the house like a dark tide. Sam took the couch, insisting he could wake faster than any of them if trouble came. Mia lay in her small bedroom, Scout sleeping against her ribs. But sleep didn't come. She stared at the cracked ceiling, listening to the wind and thinking of her father, of the promise she'd once made him, whispered into the dirt the day she buried him. "I'll protect what's ours, no matter how small." Tonight, that promise throbbed like a heartbeat. Morning arrived pale and tense. The sky looked washed out, as though even the sun doubted what the day would bring. Elijah spent the hours until noon testing the audio, backing up the files, preparing duplicates. Sam sharpened an old pocket knife, his hand steady, his jaw locked. Mia swept the porch, her movements automatic, grounding her in the rhythm of survival. When the time came to leave, Scout climbed into the truck without hesitation. His loyalty wasn't loud, but it was absolute. The drive into town was silent. Kingsport appeared deceptively normal. Small shops opening, fishermen hauling nets, children kicking stones down sidewalks. But beneath that calm was a tension Elijah felt in the pit of his stomach. He had seen towns like this before. Towns living under the shadow of one man's wealth. Towns that acted blind because blind was safer. Not today. The town hall was already crowded when they arrived. People lined the walls, whispering, watching. At the front of the room stood Harrison Vanderbilt, polished and smiling, rehearsed and radiant beneath the lights. His wife Eleanor sat nearby, her expression taut with venom and forced poise. Sheriff Brody stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. He was tired, exhausted even, but there was a sharpness in his gaze that hadn't been there the last time Elijah had seen him. Elijah, Mia, Sam, and Scout walked down the aisle. Conversations died as they passed. Whispers sharpened. The townspeople's eyes followed them like the slow turn of a tide. Harrison's smile stiffened, but he didn't falter. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "let us begin. Tonight we discuss the final approval of the Kingsport Commercial Center, an opportunity to bring prosperity to our—" "Stop!" Elijah's voice didn't shout, yet it cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. Scout sat at attention, leaning subtly against Mia's leg. Harrison's smile collapsed. "You don't have the floor, Commander Thorne." "I do now," Elijah replied calmly, stepping closer to the dais. Sheriff Brody sighed, stepped forward, and faced the microphone. "He has the floor." Harrison spun toward the sheriff. "This is outrageous." "Sit down, Harrison." For the first time, the sheriff's voice didn't waver. Harrison sat, not by choice, by instinct. Elijah turned to the audience. "Many of you heard rumors, accusations, lies. Tonight, you'll see the truth." Mia stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she placed the SD card on the technician's desk. The young man hesitated, glancing between her and Harrison. Then he inserted the card. The screen flickered. The first video appeared, Mia stumbling at the hotel banquet, the glass falling, Eleanor slapping her with a rage that froze the hall. Gasps swept through the room. Then came the second clip, Harrison kicking Scout across the garden until the puppy landed in the roses. Mothers in the crowd covered their mouths. Men shook their heads, disgusted. A third recording began. Harrison's voice, cold and sharp, filled the speakers. "Force her out. Break the house if you have to. I want that land cleared by Thursday." People shifted uneasily, some muttering in disbelief. Then the final audio played. Harrison threatening a zoning official's family if he didn't approve the project. When the screen turned black, the room was painfully silent. Mia felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She felt exposed, seen, but not small, not anymore. Mrs. Gable, the elderly librarian, stood up first. She turned her back on Harrison. Not a word, just a gesture older than any law. One by one, others followed, farmers, teachers, mechanics, shop owners, dozens, then the entire room, turning their backs. Harrison surged to his feet. "This is fake, deep fake, lies. I will sue every one of you." Sheriff Brody stepped forward slowly, each step deliberate. "Harrison Vanderbilt," he said, drawing out his cuffs, "you are under arrest." Harrison lunged toward the exit, wild and panicked, but Scout growled, a deep, warning sound, and Harrison froze long enough for Brody to grab him. The cuffs clicked shut. Harrison was dragged past Mia. He stared at her with hatred burning in his eyes, but she stood tall, not in defiance, but in truth. She didn't hide, she didn't shrink, and that broke him more than anything. As Brody led Harrison away, the room erupted into murmurs of relief, disbelief, and a justice long overdue. Elijah stood quietly beside Mia, watching her breathe through the moment, absorbing the weight lifting off her shoulders. Sam clapped a hand onto Elijah's back. "It's done," he said. But Elijah knew better. Victories won in public had consequences born in the shadows. Harrison had allies, contracts, lawyers, people who owed him favors. The fight wasn't over. It was simply moving into a different terrain. Still, tonight, the town had chosen its side, and that mattered. Elijah took Mia's hand gently. "Let's go home," he said. But as they stepped outside into the cold night air, a black SUV sped past the town hall, slowing just enough for Elijah to see the face in the passenger's seat, a man he didn't recognize. But the message was clear. Harrison may have fallen, but someone else was picking up his war. In the quiet that followed the storm of lies and fear, Mia finally understood what Elijah had always believed. Miracles do not arrive wrapped in thunder, nor do they shout their presence from the sky. More often, they walk quietly beside us, sometimes on wounded paws, sometimes in the courage we never knew we had, sometimes in the strangers God places in our path at the exact moment we are ready to give up. The victory over Harrison wasn't just a legal triumph. It was a reminder that no darkness can outlast a heart protected by faith, mercy, and truth. And perhaps the greatest miracle was not what they won, but how they were transformed. Broken people, lifted by grace, held together by a God who never left them, even when hope trembled. As you finish this story, may you remember that your own battles, your fears, your long nights, none of them are unseen. God walks with you through every valley. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may find hope too. Leave a comment of where you're watching from, and may God bless you and your family with strength, peace, and protection. And if you believe no one, human or animal, should ever fight their battles alone, subscribe to join this community of compassion.